Hey everybody, welcome to episode 44. Today's interview is with Mr. Jeff Johnson. Jeff A. Johnson is a senior VFX artist and supervisor with a background bridging film and games in many disciplines, and which has taken him all over the globe. His film work includes franchises such as Lord of the Rings, Matrix, Star Wars, Star Trek, Hellboy, and Shrek. His game development titles include Black Ops 3, Call of Duty, Zombies Chronicle Remaster, and Gears Tactics, on which project he was the lead VFX artist at Splash Damage, a studio in London.
Welcome to the Real-Time Visual Effects Podcast, the place to hear from some of the video game industry's most seasoned artists and up your game. Listen in on how you can learn and grow as a VFX artist, discover your own wizard, and network with hundreds of other talented magicians in the real-time visual effects community. Here is your host, Travis McCallum.
Jeff, how you doing today, buddy?
Hey, Travis. I'm doing all right. Thank you for having me on. It's very fun.
How's the weather where you are right now?
It's all right. I'm in California right now, actually. Northern California, so it's pretty mild. Don't have to deal with the heat in LA, things like that. It's
That's
calm.
good, man. So, Jeff, I want to ask you, how did you get started in visual effects?
Yeah, so my story is less about the sort of fantasy, get your dream job, and it's more about taking a practical approach to building a career. So, when I was a kid and teenager, I had two sort of creative tracks that I was on. I was a musician, singer, songwriter, and then I was also storyteller and filmmaker. And, of course, I wanted to be a rock star. And of course, I wanted to be not a movie star, but a star director. I wanted to be the next Spielberg or Lucas or Zemeckis. And as I got towards college, I realized that the chances of any of that happening were astronomical. But I realized that taking a realistic approach to actually finding a job in that industry, either industry, was very viable. So in college, I focused on the audio side. I focused on sound engineering, recording engineering, sound design, sound mixing. And on the filmmaker side, I focused on looking at production jobs, technician jobs. And of course, at that time, the burgeoning field of CGI. And I also got involved with student groups, connecting with my peers and getting hands-on experience. This is at Michigan State University. And one of the groups that I was involved with was the MSU Filmmakers. And one of my classmates, the guy that I took the group over for, was Jeff Johns, who of course went on to do amazing things at DC and Warner Brothers. And I also knew that I needed to get an internship. That was a key stepping stone towards building a career and getting started on a pathway to a solid career. So again, with both channels, I flooded the market with inquiries and applications for internships at recording studios, sound mixing stages, live sound support, and on the film side at visual effects studios. And the one that clicked was Cinesight. And at the time, they were only in Hollywood. But I landed that internship, and I spent a summer while I was still a college student in Los Angeles and Hollywood, and learning the ins and outs of the VFX industry. And that was key to getting me on my path to visual effects.
That's awesome. You were all the way in Michigan, and was that your first time ever going to California?
It was, actually. My sister lived there, and I was able to stay with her in South Pasadena. That was critical, too, because trying to live there on my own and with the cost and everything at the time would probably be prohibitive, but I was able to just stay at her place and then borrow her car even when I needed to and get around. And, not only was it, as I said, an introduction to the film industry and VFX, but also, California and the LA lifestyle.
Rock on. Talk me through a day in the life of Jeff from sunrise to sunset. What does that look like today?
Yeah, well, I'll go back to the recent job that I had was at Splash Damage, as you mentioned. So what it would be...
Quick, can you tell us what is Splash Damage?
Yeah. Splash Damage is a company, a game development studio in southern part of London, a town called Bromley, which is a suburb of London, essentially. But it's also right on the cusp of Kent, which is this sort of idyllic, pastoral, very green, a lot of farmland. And so it always straddles that line between people who love being in London and people who love being in Kent. But it's a studio that started, actually they're celebrating their 20th anniversary this year.
Wow.
Yeah, and it started with just a group of 3 friends who love to mod games, and they did multiplayer versions of, thinking back to this, Castle Wolfenstein, Doom, and Quake Wars. And those series were called Enemy Territory, and they were very popular at the time, and they really made a splash. Really made an impact and got a lot of attention. And they've built a full-fledged company from that over the years. And they had a co-dev relationship for a while with Microsoft. They worked quite a bit on doing the multiplayer versions of Gears of War. And then I was on there for the foray into the tactics genre. Of course, Gears Tactics. So as the lead VFX artist there at Splash Damage, first thing you get in there, I like to get in a little early, just get prepped and make sure I have a little time to work before things start flooding in. I don't even have to check my email before I really get started the day.
So do you have like a morning routine or a ritual that kind of gets you out of bed?
Yeah. I mean, of course, we've been working from home for a year and a half since March of 2020. So it took me a little while, a few weeks for sure, to get into a rhythm of how the cadence would be when I would get going. But I really stuck to being kind of strict on myself, setting the exact time as if I was going to the office. It was the same as if I was going to the office, but instead of commuting across town, I commuted across the room. So I would start at a regular time. First thing, we would have a kickoff or stand up with my VFX team. I had 3 artists on the team, and talk a little bit about team structure in a second, but we would just check in. Stand-ups, of course, of what did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? Are you having any blockers or problems? And we'd go through those lists. I would share my work. I would share sort of an overview of what the week's going to look like based on the production cycle. Usually we had 4-week sprints. So each week would be hitting the milestones, and then we would have a week of hardening, cleanup, and locking in what the delivery was going to be for that month. So based on whatever week we're on, we looked at the week ahead. We then had the beginning of the week started with a team kickoff, usually, which again only lasted like 10, 15 minutes, just high level updates from the execs on the leadership team on the project. And then we would break off into feature teams. And that's the way Splash like to work is, they would have a whole team underneath an umbrella of a feature. So it was either going to be environments, a world, or player character, or enemies, or missions. Some people don't like that because it's a little broad, and some people prefer a more agile approach to specific straight teams. Like instead of saying, "Oh, here's our player character team," it's like, "Oh no, we're going to work on this one character, and we're going to work on their weapon and their ability, and that's what we're going to do this month. And at the end of the month, we're going to have that team split up and work on other things." But I like the approach of just really knowing what's going on. It's a good team-wide structure, I feel. So then we have the feature stand-ups. I would ping anybody on my team if there was any updates or any significant things that came out of that. I would let my team work. We'd have our lunch break. I would do my own work. A lot of meetings during the week, a lot of like regularly scheduled meetings. We would have a leads check-in with the producers, usually twice a week. We would have any number of we need to talk about this. Again, going back to the features and the strike teams, is like, okay, we really need to plan what's going to happen with this next character or this next part of the city or whatever. And we'd get those meetings done. I'd invite my team in for visibility or if I think they needed to contribute. But for the most part, the way I like to approach managing and working with my team is pretty hands-off, pretty high level. Really like just tell them what the objective is, what the target is. Make sure they understand it. Question them about how are they going to do that, and make sure that I think that that's the right way to do it. And then just let them go. If they have ideas, they can build in their own ideas. They can make sure that they talk peer wide across to other people, other designers, other environment artists, rather than he come to go up to me, go across the leads, back down, or back to. I really think that's the sensible way to work. And I really trusted my team. We had been working with them for a while. Once we got everything in a groove, and I think it worked really well. And people really, at least in my team, people really seem to like to work that way. They really thought they have ownership. They have autonomy, they can contribute, they feel listened to.
Your philosophy on leadership is less of a dictatorship and more of a facilitator.
Yeah, and one thing that was really cool about Splash Damage was that they had management training program. So a lot of people that they promoted from above, or people even that came in from outside, they wanted to have a kind of core philosophy of how their team ran. So just to make sure people were all in the same boat. If people had other styles, that they could contribute that or talk about that, but we wanted to make sure it was consistent and that the Splash experience was pretty much the same, or at least in the same bucket for everyone who worked there, as far as management and even up and down. And there was a lot of different models. And on one hand, it was sort of very philosophical and by the book, but it was really interesting to see that because I had been a manager and a supervisor before, but I'd never really gotten that in-depth training like that. So I understood kind of I knew my approach and I knew like what worked or didn't, but to understand other ideas that could contribute to that, to solidify that and to make that a little more cohesive, that was really helpful. And one of the things related to sort of what you said was that people who are closest to the information have the best decision-making in the moment. Mm-hmm. So if someone's working on a character and they're working with the character artist and they both know exactly what they want to do, they can get it done faster than talking to me, talking to the character supervisor, us talking. They would just do it and then they would say, here's what it is. And then me and the other leads would go, okay, yeah, I'd give them notes. rather than telling them what to do step by step.
Absolutely. So you work through your day, a lot of meetings, and at some point you stop working during the day, right? You eventually, stop.
There were days like that, yeah.
What's your wind down routine? How do you kind of spend your off times as you settle in for the evening?
Yeah. Well, at the time, my wife was working from home as well, and she had her set routines. We would each be in our separate rooms in the flat and doing our own work. We'd take our breaks for lunch, of course. And then at the end of the day, we just sort of break, have dinner, have our meal, work, prepare it together, just so that was our together time. I'm a news junkie, so we would sit and watch BBC or Sky News, or at that time we also had CNN. So just putting on the news and just catching up with the day. And, sometimes we would go out, not so much during the week. That was really cool about Bromley as well, is that we were so walkable. We could leave the house and within 10, 15 minutes, we'd be in a pub or a nice restaurant. We get on a train, within 40 minutes, we were in London. And
I love it.
Yeah, just really like the area and the lifestyle there.
What is your philosophy on visual effects?
With approach to how they're done, or what the purpose is, or how they're presented.
Yeah. But the question I may have is, in terms of why do games or movies need them? Why is our role so important to the success of a game or a movie?
Yeah, that's a very cool question. I think that they enhance the world. They really build the details of the world. Each shot is its own story, right? For the most part, you'd have the sequences, but you'd have everything that's in the shot is carefully composed, and it's designed by the director and the production designer, and to some degree our VFX supervisor, of where things need to be. Where's the audience going to be looking? And of course, you want to have big selling point of it, and that's what's going to be the wow inspiring moment for the audience, and go, oh my God, that's so cool. Games, I found, is a bit different. You're going to have some of that as well. You're really going to have that punch to it, but because you don't know where the audience is, the player is going to be looking at any given moment. You want, or from what angle, especially. So you're going to want to say, okay, well, here's what's happening in this moment, and the player needs to be engaged with that. And I tend to think of it more as world building and just player experience. So when you're in there, it just has to make everything feel immersive and real as much as possible. So you could have, for an environment standpoint, you put in all these details and all the greeble on the walls, whatever, and all the specifics on the paint jobs and things like that, which is of course important, but then the VFX brings it to life, right? Mm-hmm. So you're going to have, at any given moment, any given 60th of a second, you're going to sell that to the player, and you really want them engaged with it at that moment.
I love that you mentioned world building. That's such a cool and unique thing that exists in games. And as VFX artists, you get to collaborate with the different utilities and teams to bring worlds to life.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I feel that in some ways that's the biggest connection, the bridge between film and VFX. Having come from both worlds, I think a lot of people ask me, what's the difference, or what's your takeaway, or how do you compare them? Film, as I mentioned, it's all about storytelling. Each shot is going to be what you deliver to the audience. There's sort of a middle ground too, because I worked in feature animation, DreamWorks and Dr. D and a few other places at Image Movers Digital. And it's a sequence-based approach to that. So it's going to be the script, the shots happen in a certain room or location or part of the world, and for the sequence you're going to build that out together, right? So you're going to be, okay, well, here's what this section looks like. Lead lighter, usually in that case, will create it and set up a few key shots, and then every other shot has to fit in within that. You really are world building at that point. You're really taking a location and saying, here's how it looks from whatever angle. And the next step to that in games is that the camera can go anywhere in that world. So I think that was helpful for me in my transition, going from straight up VFX, live action, to animation, to games. And it's still the same end goal for the audience, is really just immersiveness and making them believe where they're at and what they're looking at.
Rock on. I want to ask specifics now. Can you please share some of your experience working in VFX for games? And if you could maybe share some of the projects that you've worked on.
Yeah. As I said, I've come to games a little bit later, after having worked in film for over a decade. The first game project I worked on was actually Call of Duty Black Ops 3. And I was actually there as a senior lighting artist, but I bridged across with the VFX team. And one of the points that I used as a connection was taking their effects that were interactive, lighting effects, and making sure that they fit not only our technical and performance model of lighting, but also they hit the right quality and the right consistency notes with what we were doing with lighting. So I got in there and did tweaks of glows and magic effects and explosions and things like that to make sure that the lighting matched up. And that was a chance for me to kind of sidle up with the effects artist and go, hey, if I got this thing open, I'm going to change the lighting. Can I also, do some tweaks here and there? And most of the time they say, okay, cool. And then, show them what I was doing. And I'd done effects animation, as it's known in the film side of things. Mm-hmm. I'd done that in other places as well. And this is a chance for me to build up my VFX chops and understanding the workflow and the tools. Right. So within that, after we did Black Ops 3 title and DLC, we did the Zombies remaster. And when I got into there, I was setting up most of the lighting for all of the maps initially. Mm-hmm. And then I was also tweaking some of the VFX that came through. It's on my reel that I did. Obviously, a remaster, you're going to take what's there, redo it, and remake it if you have to, if the original assets don't hold up. So I redid and remade a lot of the perk machines in Zombies. If those, people in the audience are familiar with that, I'm sure. So it's like a fake, vintage-looking cola vending machine with all sorts of lights and smoke and effects coming out of it. I redid those. I redid some of the traps. So a lot of the sort of, again, vintage-looking mad scientists props. So that was a lot of fun to do those. And then going into what I did at Splash Damage, I came in as the lead on Gears Tactics, which was underway when I joined the team, and they just finished their vertical slice, their beauty corner, and now they needed to, as we know across the industry, once you do your beauty corner, you go, okay, how do we make the game out of this? They love how it looks.
I want to plead ignorance here. What is a beauty corner?
Yeah, sure. Beauty corner is sort of an art benchmark, art showcase. There's different terms at different companies for it, but beauty corner is usually strictly art. It's something that they know is going to be part of the game, like a city block or a couple of city blocks. They take it to a very high quality and polish for the visuals on it, mostly in arts, environment art and materials, but also visual effects and lighting is involved with that. And this is usually a showcase for investors or executives to say, here's what it's going to look like for sure.
Is that one of the things they put in those, promotional trailers at like E3? It's kind of like not something you would use in gameplay footage, right. But...
Yeah. Definitely. It has to run it runs in engine, of course, and it usually has to run optimally in engine in game, right? So you can't just say, hey, it's going to look like this, and it runs at 20 frames a second. The sort of next level of that, a term that I've heard used is the beauty corner. Sorry, the vertical slice, which is taking the beauty corner and making it into a playable level.
Got it.
So it's integrating everything in there.
So at Splash Damage or any of the other companies you worked at, I'm just curious, what are maybe a challenge or an obstacle that you faced, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah.
I know as VFX artists, problem solving is so part of our job.
Absolutely. Yeah. It usually comes down to optimization. It's coming down to, again, going back to the vertical, the beauty corner or an effect that you can make. You can put the visuals on it and make it look like, okay, yeah, this is how it looks. It's going to be awesome. And maybe if it's like one thing, like one fire or one type of explosion, oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, it runs okay. And then you put 24 of them, 50 of them in a shot, and it doesn't run at all. So the biggest challenge is, of course, that bridge between what the art director needs, what you can do with just a very direct setup, and what needs to be simplified for getting into the game. And ideally, you're always going to start at that simple level and build up until it breaks. Mm-hmm. It's so frustrating, and it's counterproductive to say, I'm going to put it all in there and then take it out, because for a number of reasons, but mainly because it's difficult to work that way and get back to where you need to be.
I feel like, especially when you're in prototyping, it's better to go bigger so you can scale it down rather than start small, and then your director's like, I need more. Yeah. I need more. And you're like, how much more do you need?
Right. No, that's a valid point as well, and there's two philosophies to that. Obviously, if you're going to push the art side and go with the art director and say, this is awesome stuff I'm going to give you, at least have a plan for how you're going to get out of it. How you're going to dig yourself out of that hole. And it depends on the art director as well. A lot of times the art director is very open to, if not collaboration, but at least that sort of imagination. Yeah. Like, okay, here's how the pieces are. We can start to build it, and it's going to look like, based on what your concept was, I'm going towards that concept. Oh yeah, sure, it's great. Sometimes you have art directors where you show them something in progress or show them something half done, and they'll go, I don't know what I'm looking at. What is this? Where's this going? This doesn't look like my beautiful sketch.
Yeah. I know you're a lead right now over at Splash Damage, and this question may be too ambiguous to ask. I figured I would, because every team or company is going to have their own needs. But in your opinion, what would you say is an ideal VFX team? Like, what are the characteristics that would make the best team?
Right. Yeah, that's good as well. Chemistry is always important. People work together, people bounce ideas off of each other. That's very hard to judge, especially when you're hiring people. That's something that comes after weeks or months of working together and people understanding the workflow and understanding the tools, understanding the vision well. But I think that you're almost always going to have a range of experiences. You're going to want one or two seniors. You're always going to have juniors on the team. Just the realities of the situation, because for budget, for one, you're never going to have I'm going to get 4 seniors and we're going to do this. But also, it's important to build the team and build at the studio and mentor people, get people in, and nurture them. But that's strong of a word. But just make sure that it's a good group and they understand and they like what's going on with the company. And they like the idea that okay, I can work my way up here.
Yeah.
And VFX artists are going to have less or more, of one. My old lead called it a superpower, one thing that they do, a couple things they do well. Some people are going to be more technical. Some people can get in there and go, okay, I'm going to do this blueprint and get it done in half a day, and it's cool and it really works. And then some people are going to be more keen to saying, okay, here's the concept. And within, a day or 2 days, they get it and it looks perfect. Not perfect, but it's wow, this is so close to what we need to look like. And you're going to want to play up those skills, but also, everyone complements each other. So if someone's saying, oh, I have this idea for what I want to do for this, interactive, flow thing, I need help with blueprint. Also, it's Splash Damage. I know a few other places, but I really appreciate it. Splash, the tech art teams and the VFX teams were very well integrated, and they complemented each other very well too, because they hired a lot of tech artists who had a really good eye and good ideas on the art side.
That's great. All right. One of the things that I found super interesting about your background, Jeff, is your experience with crowd simulations.
Right.
Can you tell me what is a crowd simulation and why is it important first?
Yeah. So I'd done crowds for film at a few places. I'd used Massive, which was the one that was built at Weta Digital for the giant orc battles. And I didn't work crowds at Weta many times I've been there. But I think that I really like crowds as a discipline because it was so widespread and touched on so much from the beginning to the end of a pipeline. Obviously, the first part of your question is, why are they important? Again, going back to world building and the experience, it adds a level of realism and depth to it that really sells a shot or a sequence or again a battle, interactive scenes for the audience. And it's very cool to think is when you watch one of these scenes and you can pick out individual characters or something and you think, wow, that's all driven by AI and they're all just that's a simulation and it looks like a real actor on a scene. So that's always fun.
Now, are crowd simulations simulated to battle scenes only, or are there other places you can create crowds?
No, there's a lot of applications for it. A lot of one of the biggest applications for it actually is stadiums and sporting events and big rallies, big crowd events like that, because it's so prohibitive to hire those people to just stand there for hours. Whereas even in a battle scene, there's a lot more action, a lot more specific things people do. But the place I worked at, Method Studios, I was the lead crowds artist there for a year. And just before I joined, they had really built up their crowd system on a movie called Invictus, which is Morgan Freeman as Nelson Mandela and Matt Damon as the captain of the South African rugby team. So it was right after Nelson Mandela became president, and it was he needed the whole nation to get behind the rugby team, to unify the country. And all of the stadium games inside the stadiums were done with the crowd system, standing up, cheering, waving, standing, sitting, standing, sitting, standing, sitting, to get those loops in there and make them all believable and make it seem like this is very natural. So,
talking on the world building part and looking into games, often I see crowd simulations for flocks of birds. And I think when we saw the Unreal 5 demo, the little scarab bugs that were kind of immersed in the sands, those are more examples. I would be curious to ask, if somebody wanted to get into crowd sim for games, where would they go to learn about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that, again, with games as well, there's varying levels of complexity. So things like the birds and the insects, those are more just a general flocking algorithm. So it's more of essentially a particle simulation to react to to stimuli and conform to terrain. It's not the same thing as a complex AI brain, which is the fuzzy logic system of where the character, usually done for enemies, say, or NPCs. So the character has its starting point. It has its rules for where it can go. Like if an enemy spawns at a certain point, it has to know where the players are, know the terrain, so it can get to a cover point or like a sniper, like a vantage point, and it needs to know step by step where the pathing it needs to go and make those decisions. I mean, I would probably say for the game side, just really look into what tutorials are available. Unreal, the Unreal Engine Inside Unreal YouTube channel has an amazing wealth of tutorials or demos, at least. Less tutorials. We know from UE4 that they, from Epic, they have their demos and say, here's what we can do with it. And, you can do this in 2 years. It's all exciting stuff. So I would say start with that. I mean, UE4 has a really nice behavioral tree and fuzzy logic system as well. Houdini has a great crowd system now. There's other ones that are a little more bespoke, custom to like Maya plugins like MiArmy and Golem are good ones as well. But I don't know what sort of tutorial resources available for those, but Houdini and UE4 for sure.
Sure. And as we were talking about some of those program softwares that VFX artists can go and experiment with, do you have any advice that they should keep in mind as they kind of learn about the crowd simulation software so they avoid pitfalls they may run into?
Yeah, I would say at the core of it is performance. Understand animation, understand natural motion, understand blending and pathing, because you could have like characters that pop around for no reason. You could have characters that look very unnatural, look very unrealistic in how they're moving. Like I mentioned, what I liked about crowds was that it went from beginning to end. So as a crowd lead, I would be there for the mocap. I didn't supervise any mocap sessions at that point, but understanding the mocap coming in, understanding the animation setups and blendings, understanding the models and how the library of models are going to be swapped out for woman 1, 2, 3, 4, and how the variations need to be. The next step would be to understand that whole pipeline, how the simulations go and how the randomizations and variations work, even at a shader level, how they're controlled. But the first step would be just really understanding performance and what characters would do in those situations.
For sure. You had worked online for a year as a VFX mentor with is it a company or a program called Animation Mentor?
Yeah, it's a company based in East Bay in California, in Emeryville.
Cool.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little about your experience in both formal and informal education and what's some advice you have for aspiring artists looking to get an FX and whether continuing education, paying lots and lots of money for tuition and stuff is worth it?
Right. Yeah, that's an age-old question, of course, for anybody who wants to trying to get in. I really enjoyed that position, one of the work that I did there. It was interesting because they had already been pretty well established as an animation online school, and it is very industry based. So many people have worked professionally at some of the bigger studios. There's Pixar, Disney, ILM, and one of my co-workers from PDI DreamWorks, he got involved with it, and he was the one that pushed and built their VFX program beyond, outside of the animation. And it was very cool. It was he and one other lighting supervisor did the weekly lessons, and I was involved with doing the labs, essentially. So I would meet with 4 to 8 students every week and review some of the key points from the lecture, add in my own experiences and my own ideas for it, see what questions are, and then just sort of help them along week by week, or even check in with them a couple times a week on their projects. They had their main assignments each week, but then of course the end thesis where they chose a single scene or a single object to model and light. At the time, my forte was modeling. My lighting. I had done some VFX as well at that point. I wasn't so up on the modeling and texturing points. I did a little bit of look dev and shader work on that, but I helped them as much as I could. and I think it was very useful for the group. And also there were other peers. The guy that hired me for it also brought in some other peers from DreamWorks and other places. So it was a good community, and the other teachers would talk to each other. We'd have our own chats and things like that. So it was really good to see how other people were approaching it.
They always say that when you teach material, you retain it better because you're learning by repeating. So I bet it really helps solidify your understanding of the material you were teaching.
Yeah, for sure. Because it was always like, if you have a question, if you know how to do this, but I have to keep reminding myself. It's like, no, I do this every week now, so I know exactly what I'm doing with it. And then they had good students there as well. Some really amazing looking projects and scenes that they did. I've seen a couple names come up in my LinkedIn now of people that were students that are now at other, got jobs at other studios. One case was really cool because it was a guy who was a little bit advanced in his career. He had been working in broadcast and motion graphics for many years. And he just thought to himself, well, I really want to take the leap and work in film. And he joined Animation Mentor. He was very engaged with me about asking questions and getting advice and really like, portfolio reviews, but also, how does this look? No, really, how does this look? And how is this going to be, how are other supervisors going to take this? So I was very honest and in depth in my notes for him. It turns out he did get a job. He was in, I believe, Indiana or Illinois at the time. He got a job to move to Vancouver to work at one of the major studios there. Probably shouldn't say which one at this point, but one of the top studios there. And he got in as a lighting artist. He worked there for a year, and within a little over a year, he was a lighting lead. So that's a really good success story. It's really inspiring to see people who, that I helped out, but also they had the talent, they had the drive, and I was just there to answer some questions for them.
It goes back to that idea of mentorship and being a facilitator. It is a student-driven journey where you can provide the tools and, a sounding board for them to bounce it off, but at the end of the day, they have to put in the work if they want to get somewhere.
Absolutely.
Rock on. Now you're working as a lead in VFX. What are some of the responsibilities and challenges that you have had to bring into this lead position compared to some of your earlier roles where you weren't leading a team?
Right. Yeah, the responsibility is a key word there, of course, because you are responsible or accountable, as some models show it, for all the VFX getting done and everything that goes in there looking great and working. So again, it goes back to trusting my team. It's saying like, here's what needs to be done. Here's how you can do it. Go ahead and do it, and let me know how it's going. And once it's in there in the game, then we can sign off on it. But it's more about keeping track of so many different things. I couldn't do it all myself, but I wouldn't want to. I wanted to get the team involved and get everyone together to work towards the common goal. The way I see it sometimes is the lead wears three different hats, where it's like he's artistic, where he's supervising, he's making sure that the content that goes in the game is looking correct. It's technical, making sure that it all works together. It's to understand the tool set, has to understand what people are building and how it integrates across the board. But then it's also personnel and managerial. And it's really the logistics of scheduling and making sure everyone's getting the work done, but also being there to help people out if they have problems, if they seem to be struggling, or if there's points where they looks like they could ask have some questions, or they're not asking questions. Really go in there and saying how's it going? What do you need? What are you looking for? So I think that it's a balance between all those things.
Yeah. So what is some advice that you may have for fellow leads in different companies who may also have to manage and mentor others? Nugget of wisdom.
Yeah, try. Again, part of it is talking with your team, is making sure that trusting them and knowing where you may not be able to trust them, whether there might be gaps, or it's like, okay, I know you can do these A, B, C, but you might need a little help with D and E, and I won't do it for you, but I'll keep asking you about it, and I'll make sure that you're on the right path and give you the right tools or process to do those things. It's also very important upward on the chain to communicate and to give production the numbers and the information and the schedules that they need to keep other leads and your peers up to date, so they're not asking questions they don't know where something's waiting for, that they don't know what's happening. And also art director and other senior leads to make sure that they have the confidence that they don't need to know every day, every minute by minute, what you're working on and where it's at, but they need to know, hey, this character needs to be done Friday, we're going to review. And they need to have that confidence and trust in you that you're going to do it, and then you're going to get your team to do that as well.
Great. We are moving into the lightning round questions, quick and easy, just like visual effects. Are you ready, Jeff?
Yes, I'll try to be less less long-winded.
What is a perfect one-day getaway in Emeryville, California, and the surrounding area?
Beach. It's not a warm beach, but it's a Land's End, so it's just a different world you're looking at.
What video game or app are you using on your phone that is the most fun?
I don't tend to play a lot of mobile games on my phone, but there was one that I had a long time ago called Snailboy, a company in South Africa. And I don't think I don't think the company's around even more, but occasionally I keep going to it and bring it up and go, oh, this is fun. I remember why I played this.
What is your favorite thing to cook or eat?
Kale. I just want to be
Healthy.
controversial.
What is your favorite book or podcast you've listened to recently?
I tend to veer towards more the newsy podcasts. There's actually one podcast that I listen to that's ostensibly it's a sports broadcast, but they do a lot of social commentary and a lot of like current events. It's called the Dan Le Batard Show. It used to be on ESPN, but they got axed from that last year. But they still run a podcast. It's very irreverential, very sort of like dumb, but they make some good points. They have some good guests on there.
Is it more entertaining or is it just more controversial?
Mm-hmm. It's mostly entertaining. It's kind of a goofy cast of characters.
Favorite video game visual effect that you're jealous of that is not your own?
I definitely have to say in the last 2 years, the game that's had the most impression on me visually, especially for visual effects, is Control. I mean, they just do some amazing things with volumetrics in there that I wish I could do. I wish I could get into a game.
Best advice for a first-time visual effects artist or someone looking to get into the industry?
Yeah, I know the prevailing wisdom is usually like, oh, learn art and understand art theory and be versed in art. And I think that's important, but I also think that it's perhaps more important, or it has a bigger initial impact if you have a more widespread technical background. So I would say, as much as you want to learn about just making cool stuff, get as much into the technical side of things. If not coding, at least top level scripting. Understand the workflows of visual scripting, like blueprints, and even like Microsoft Studio or Visual Studio, things like that.
What are you most excited about for the future of visual effects?
I think with next gen coming around, the new wave of graphics cards. I would say ray tracing, but that's here already. It's been around for a couple of years now, and there's a lot of games that are releasing with full-on real-time ray tracing. But I think that coupled with the sheer volume of like point cloud data that we can manipulate is going to be a huge impact for visual effects, the volumetrics.
What question do you never get asked that you wish you were asked more often?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I think there's a lot of questions about not only just technical workflow and what I like, but I guess outside questions. The question about doing a day trip is a fun one. More questions like that, like just not only like what do you do when you're staring at a computer with the mouse or a pen in your hand, but also like what do you do outside of that fuels your passion to keep going.
Yeah. Here's a question then. What is a hobby that is not related to your work or video games that not a lot of people know about?
It's a good question. I mean, I'm still a musician, and more than a hobby, it's a passion still, and I still play out when I can. But maybe collecting hot sauces.
Are you a Taco Bell fan?
No. I appreciate Taco Bell there. It's funny because in London, the widespread joke there is that there's no good Mexican food, which is sadly true. But they do have the franchises there. They have like Chipotle and a couple of equivalents to that. They have 2 Taco Bells in London that I know of. And in general, when I'm in the US, I wouldn't go to Taco Bell, but there in London, I'm like, okay, let's go to Taco Bell.
Are there any final thoughts or things you want to plug? Any projects or people you want to do a shout out or promote?
It's with the game industry, there's a lot of, you don't have the same release cycle. So, films, you can be working on that for half a year at a time, and games is like 2-3 years. Next game's coming out. So, the next game I was working on, I've actually just left Splash Damage recently. I'm moving on to my next thing, which I can't announce, can't talk about that much, but it's another lead VFX position in AAA development. And I can't really talk about what I left at Splash Damage because that doesn't come out it's an online free-to-play game that comes out next year. So nothing to plug, but just in general thoughts, I think that I'm really excited with where real time is going, how it's growing in so many different industries and so many different applications. What really got me motivated to jump from film into games was where games was at the time. There was a lot more capacity, a lot more capability to do really high quality cinematic like work in basically lighting and VFX and in environments and volumetrics. And it's it's grown the way I expected, and it's really satisfied my desire and my expectations for that, and it's exceeded them, and it's growing faster. And one thing that has happened the last couple of years, it's year and a half, especially with remote working and the pandemic lockdown, is virtual production. And I think that's super exciting to see that real-time engines, especially UE4 and other ones that people are building, that allows traditional filmmakers to work with real-time technologies, because that was the real gap that I felt was missing, between film and games. And I think that with filmmakers getting these tools in the hand of people who make these giant blockbuster epics and TV shows, and really moving forward with what games are going to be, the convergence point about where those could be and what an interactive experience could be for a player in the next even just a few years is going to be phenomenal. And I think we're really excited about that.
I agree 100%. In fact, one really popular YouTube channel, Film Riot, just released a video explaining how Unreal Engine is the future for CGI graphics in film. So I definitely think there's going to be a lot more Mandalorians types of shows coming out here in the future utilizing real-time VFX technology.
Absolutely. Very exciting.
Jeff, man, it has been a blast being able to chat with you for the last hour. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. I hope I didn't just meander, and I know that I lost track of the questions a few times, but I just enjoyed talking to you and just getting your ideas about, conversing with you. So it's been very cool. I really like what you're doing with the podcast and the show.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for listening to today's episode with Jeff. One of the things I loved about our talk was his philosophy on how to successfully lead teams. It's great to hear all these managerial tips and tricks to make us better team collaborators. Super appreciate what he shared today. I wanted to let you know that the podcast is upgrading itself into a full featured show. If you are around, you will have noticed that we are uploading the video format of new episodes to YouTube as videos on demand. Here you can follow along with us on camera, and we will continue to include the podcast audio only versions for those that like that format as well. Hopefully we can start incorporating some cool visual effects on the screen to give it a bit more of a visual appeal, as this is a visual art we are talking about. If the new format is something that is appealing or not appealing, do let me know in the comments. Email me at travismccollum86@gmail.com, or just give us a ping in Discord. We'd love to hear feedback from fellow artists so that we can make the show bigger and better and more appealing for everybody listening. Until next time, rock on.